Team, what is up? Welcome. I am going to try my luck at a stab in the dark at a first YouTube video for you guys. And this was a little capture from a recent hunt that I did back in November 2024, taking my friend Grant out for his very first hunt, his very first bow hunt. So he had done archery a fair bit in the lead up to this. He was shooting really well. He had a heap of things go wrong in the lead up to this, where he cracked some limbs, tried to buy a new bow, ended up getting new limbs sorted, and then decided to buy a new bow. So there was a whole heap of things that happened. And when we actually got to the block, it was late in the afternoon. We had minimal light left to get up the hill and get out for our first very hunt. And then also there was lightning and thunder all around the place. So there's a bit of chaos going on, but at the same time, I was so excited to get Grant out and get him in for his very first hunt. So if you do this video, make sure that you like it below, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if this gets enough love, it might be something that I try to continue to make ongoing. Now, whenever you get out to your block, one of the very first things you should always do is make sure that you are shooting your bow to see that it is still accurate. Sometimes in transit, your bow can get bumped and you can lose accuracy on your bow. So making sure that your field point and your broadheads are shooting, mainly just your broadheads, are shooting correctly is a key part of the start of every single hunt, because you want to make sure that if you're going to take a shot at an animal, that it is as accurate can be. So you can't quite see it, but the lightning was pretty brutal, and even more so, the thunder was pumping. It was enough for me to stop and ask Grant, are you sure you're safe, or you feel safe doing this hunt? We're walking up the hill. It's going to be pretty extreme. Are you feeling safe enough to continue? He gave me the thumbs up, so off we went. We got to the very top of the hill, and the buggers made sure that we had to walk first. We got up to the very, very, very top before they even showed themselves. And when we got there, they decided that it was time to start moving down the hill. So they had started to make their way back down. And this is what started our stalk. We saw a mob of about 20 or so goats running back down the hill. And we knew that this was our opportunity that we could get Grant into for his very first shot at a goat. At least that was the goal of what we were trying to do. So in parts of this, you'll see I'm able to move reasonably fast down the hill because the goats are focused on something else. They're trying to get to their own little location. They knew what they were chasing. They were chasing feed and fresh pick, and they were making their way down through some pretty thick stuff to get to where they need to be. So they were focused on one thing. We were focused on trying to get to them, and we knew that we had to cut them off because they were hammering down that hill pretty fast. As the footage shows, we were able to take some pretty fast, loud steps at times, and then at other times we had to really slow down. One thing I was really making sure is that we were always hiding behind as much cover as possible. So putting trees in front of us, putting fallen logs in front of us to make sure that we were blocking their view. When they were far away from us, we were able to move faster, covering through that dead ground as fast as possible so that we could always keep our eyes on the goats, because they were moving at quite a pace. They would run down 100 meters, stop, have a quick feed, run off another 100 meters. And it was just a continuation of us playing cat and mouse with these goats as we were trying to get Grant's first shot away. Now we got to this part where the goats were all around all this fallen logs. We were using a fallen log to get up close to them. And when I actually got there, I ranged, and it was roughly about 25 meters. Before we got on this hunt, Grant had said, look, I'm really confident out to 20 meters. I said, great, we're shooting under 20 meters on all occasions this weekend, just to make sure that you're completely confident with your shot. So we got there and we were about 25, 22 meters, I think, was the big tree you can see with the white goat standing right behind it. So for us, I was like, well, if we can get you into a good position, you might be able to stalk down this log, essentially, using the tree as your cover. Hopefully nothing will see you and you might be able to get a shot off. If we can get you those few steps forward, this first shot will be under 20 meters. However, in the kerfuffle of us trying to figure out where Grant was going to take his shot from and where he was going to move to, the goats, one of the goats in particular, little Billy, had spotted us and had seen some movement. He wasn't really sure what we were or what we were doing there, but he was a bit onto us. As you can see, he's looking up, he has a little feed, he has another look just to see what's going on. So for us, the best step was to just stay still and wait it out, see what was going to happen next. The Billy knew something was up and he kept his eyes on us, although it didn't necessarily pull the whole herd away. It was the herd that fed off that actually made him decide that it was time to actually move off. As the goats decided to feed off, the billy decided that it was time to move on as well, and so all of the goats took off, which meant we were now continuing our game of cat and mouse. We waited for them to get over the next little drop in land before we started making any sort of movements. However, our billy friend was still a little bit aware that there was something potentially behind him and that he should keep his eyes on us, so we started to trek down slowly. I asked Grant to hop behind me so we could put the tree between us and the billy so he wouldn't capture our every move as we walked down the hill. We started moving probably a little faster than what we should have, and the billy noticed something was up. But once again, the herd was feeding on, so he decided to move on with them. In this instance, I decided it was best if we just stood still for quite a while, make sure that he was out of view before we kept moving down on the goats. Once he had moved off down the hill, it was time for us to make our move. We started stalking, once again putting the tree between us and the goats so they could not see what we were doing or where we were at all. However, because there's so many goats, it is a little bit of a tricky piece to do. You just need to make sure that they're not feeding up towards you or looking up towards you so that when you make the movement, they're not spotting any of that movement happening. As you can see, we are starting to maneuver around the tree, still trying to put that tree between us and the goats, which can be hard as you get closer to the goats and there's 20 eyes that are looking at you. However, we took our time, we made small steps with minimal noise, and made our way up to that tree. Most of the goats' heads were still down the hill, or at least feeding, so we were able to step right into that tree. When we got there though, we stepped on a stick or something, and that alerted a fair few of the goats to look up and see what was happening. Luckily, when we got to the tree though, it was still between us and them, so there was nothing for them to be scared of and run away from, so we were in a pretty good position. I was able to poke my head around the corner and take a range, and at this point all of the front facing goats were under 20 meters, which meant we were in for a shot. Grant and I were discussing on which goat we should be trying to target, and at that point they decided to come back up the hill. So as a goat was feeding straight back up the hill, I was able to range him, and at this point he was at 12 meters. I told Grant to draw multiple times. He was worried that the goat would see him. But I was like, draw, draw, draw. Now's your chance, because the goat had its head down and it was feeding. Grant drew and executed the shot nicely. However, with the angle that the goat was on, Grant slightly misjudged it, and the shot was not going to do the job right away. And at this time, the emotions and the adrenaline started to kick in for Grant. He's shaking a bit like a leaf. The goats moseyed off and stopped at about 25 meters away from us. I, unfortunately, had an arrow that had a bung knock in it because I'd hit it and had not realized. So I'm trying to place this arrow onto my string so I can take a shot. As you'll see, I draw and the arrow falls straight off. Trying to act quickly without moving too much. I get another arrow knocked, hoping that I get a shot away, and at the same time I'm asking Grant to range them. He told me they're at 25.
Between the shoulders.
I draw back, but The goats have seen too much movement and they're not sticking around to hear what's happening. Luckily, this little billy had bedded down about 50 meters away, which meant that Grant had his second stalk attempt. I told him just to take it very slowly and take his shot to finalize the kill. And with that, Grant had his very first goat down on the ground. There's a big part that happens when someone goes out for their first bow hunting where it's a very big emotional release. When you're taking the life of an animal, it doesn't come lightly. It's something that we all go through, and it's something that you actually question, should I be pulling the trigger or should I not? And it's not until you start the butchering process where it really starts to make a lot of sense to you of this is exactly why we do it. And the funny thing is, taking someone out for their very first bow hunt and watching them butcher for the very first time, it's a process where you can start to see the body kick into this variation of this is innate. This is something that I should be doing because I'm providing meat for myself, for my family, for my friends. And it's where all the cogs come together and everything starts to feel natural, feel real, feel like something that you should be doing as a provider. The next part of the video is us butchering the goat. So if you are a little squirmish, it's probably time to turn it off. However, if you're interested in knowing how you can quarter a goat whilst out in the field, or taking it with the gutless method is what it's called, where you leave the guts intact and you actually start to butcher the goat and take its legs off, then watch on, because this is the method that I use quite often. And this is how I taught Grant to do it on this occasion. So as you can see, the initial thought is just to follow the muscle line, but I really like to take this cut way wider and take it back a few ribs, so you're actually capturing the whole shoulder blade plus a bit of the extra meat that's around there, and taking that whole skirt slash the muscle off altogether, optimizing the amount of meat that you get to take home. Unfortunately for Grant, the knife that I gave him was probably not as sharp as what it absolutely could have been, which did make for it being a little bit of a different process. It's not just an easy slice to cut and start the process, but once he got the initial cut made, when he stopped sawing and actually started getting the knife to do what a knife's edge should do, he started to see some really great results. But of course, the sharper your knives are, the easier this process becomes. One of the biggest things I always tell people to do when they're butchering is to find the closest bone and use the bone as your edge. That's what we're trying to do. You're not digging against the bone directly. We're trying to use the bone to guide us as we cut along. And in this case, we're talking about the ribs. One thing that can really blunt your knives even faster is cutting the fur. So once you're inside the animal, once you cut through that layer of fascia, it's best if you're cutting from the inside out rather than the outside in. Once you know the anatomy of the animal, it does make this whole butchering process much, much easier as you understand where and what you should be cutting. Here I'm showing Grant how to use the knife as a bit more of a cutting motion rather than a sawing, where you're able to use the pressure of the knife against the skin to cut through that skin reasonably quickly. Because there is no join of the shoulder, it does make this cut reasonably easy. You can just slice straight underneath that muscle tissue of the arm, along the rib cage, and straight up to the top of the back, and that is how you get your leg off very simply. As you pass the ribs and you get to the top of the spine, you'll notice that's where your back strap is. And you want to remove that pressure from the knife being against the ribs. And what we do is we pull that leg up away from the body, and that enables you to be able to cut through that last layer of skin. And then we have the front shoulder. As the light was dropping pretty rapidly at this point in time, we decided to keep the fur on that front leg, and we will deal with the fur once we got back to camp.
Cut this skin open. Always from inside out.
The back leg is a fair bit more difficult, as there is a ball and socket joint that you need to break through. You've also got the gut wall there, so you need to be particular with where you're putting your knife's edge. The last thing you want is to break through that gut wall and to have guts anywhere near any of your new meat that you are taking from the animal. Once we have the back leg off, it's now time to get into the back straps. First thing is to break the skin that's left over between the front and back leg. Bringing up the full side so you've got full visibility of the back strap. And there we have our fresh little back strap. And now we rinse and repeat the exact same process on the other side. Well, there you have it. That is the very first video that I'm dropping for you guys. If you did like it, please let me know in the comments. Like this video, share this video around. My whole goal is to really put bow hunting in as beautiful a light as what it actually is. Bow hunting has honestly changed my life. I've seen it change so many different people's lives, and every time I take a person out for their very, very first bow hunt, you see them unwind, you see them tap back into just what is innate, and it's just a beautiful process to watch a man come to. It's almost like a rite of passage that they go through when they go through this bow hunting process, and just something that I'm absolutely so passionate about, and hopefully this highlights it a little bit. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like it, and we'll hopefully see you again. Of course, if you haven't already listened to the podcast, jump across there. There is over 200 hours of incredible episodes highlighting both my journey, but also capturing a whole lot of tips, tricks, and ways to improve your bow hunting incredibly fast. And you can find that on any platform when you search for Becoming a Bow Hunter. That's Becoming a Bow Hunter on any of your platforms to be able to listen in to some of the great episodes that I've already pieced together over the last 5.5 years.